Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today we're examining Australia's most famous missing persons case, a summer day at the beach, three siblings who never returned home, and a mystery that has haunted the nation for nearly 6 decades.
It really is a case that just fundamentally altered the psychological landscape of an entire country.
Yeah.
And, what makes it so enduring, what keeps investigators and internet sleuths awake at night, is just the sheer terrifying impossibility of it all.
I think that impossibility is exactly what grabs people first, right? Because usually when we think of true crime, our minds immediately go to, the stereotypical dark alleyway.
Right, the classic setup.
Exactly. We picture the dead of night, an isolated stretch of highway, some shadowy corner where nobody's watching. But true horror doesn't always need darkness.
No, it doesn't.
Sometimes it happens in broad daylight on a blistering hot, sunny beach. On Australia Day, which is a massive national holiday, surrounded by literally thousands of people, January 26, 1966.
And that right there is the terrifying situational anomaly at the absolute heart of this case. You have 3 children who essentially evaporated from one of the busiest public spaces in South Australia.
Glenelg Beach.
Yes, Glenelg Beach.
Yeah.
And they did so without leaving a single physical trace behind.
Oh.
No drop towel, no footprint, no discarded coin. Just an absolute void where 3 lives used to be.
It's chilling, and I want you, the listener, to really put yourself in that environment for a second. Just imagine the panic of losing sight of a child in a crowded place.
Oh, it's the worst feeling in the world.
It is. You know that heart-stopping, visceral plunge in your stomach when you turn around at the grocery store or the park, and they just aren't there?
Yeah, absolute sheer panic.
Right. But that pure terror usually lasts for, maybe 5 or 10 agonizing seconds before you spot them looking at a toy or wandering near a fountain.
Exactly.
Now, I want you to imagine that feeling of utter panic stretching out, completely unresolved, for 60 years.
It is genuinely unfathomable. It is a localized, personal apocalypse that rippled out to affect a whole nation. The very trust that society was built on simply shattered that afternoon.
It really did. So our mission today is to walk through the meticulous timeline of the Beaumont children's disappearance. We are going to explore the internet theories and modern investigations that connect this single day to, other chilling crimes in Adelaide.
There's quite a web there.
There is. And ultimately, we're going to analyze how one sunny afternoon permanently rewrote the rules of parenting and security in Australia.
To really grasp the weight of this, we have to start by understanding the era and the family at the center of this tragedy.
Right. Set the scene for us.
So Jim and Nancy Beaumont live in a quiet, respectable suburb called Somerton Park. Jim was a traveling salesman, which meant he was frequently on the road, while Nancy managed the home.
Very typical for the time.
Very typical. By all accounts, this was a completely loving, standard 1960s suburban household. There were no dark secrets brewing in the home, no history of running away.
And let's look at the kids themselves, because their personalities, especially the oldest, are crucial to understanding why the events of that day are just so baffling.
Absolutely.
So you have Jane, who was 9, Arnna was 7, and Grant was 4. And the sources we have place a massive focus on Jane's personality.
They do.
She was the oldest, and she took that role incredibly seriously. She wasn't reckless at all. She was known to be incredibly responsible, very sensible, and honestly, quite shy around adults she didn't know.
Yeah, and there's a very specific incident from November 1965, so just a couple of months prior to the disappearance, that a family friend actually recalled.
Okay, what happened?
Well, they were all at the beach, and a strange man walked up and offered to buy the kids ice cream.
Red flag immediately.
Right. But Jane immediately stepped in front of her siblings, firmly said, "No, thank you, we don't want ice cream," and literally turned the men away.
Wow.
Yeah, she had been taught the rules about strangers, and she followed them rigidly.
That detail is so important, I think, because it establishes a psychological baseline for Jane. She was highly protective of Arnna and Grant. She was cautious. She wasn't easily lured by treats from strangers.
Exactly.
So how do we reconcile that with what happens later?
Well, to do that, we have to contextualize the culture of parenting at the time. Today, if you let a 9, 7, and 4-year-old take public transit alone, Child Protective Services might be called.
Oh, without a doubt.
But in 1966, free-range parenting wasn't some trendy, debated parenting style. It was just called childhood.
Right. It was just how things were done.
It was the absolute norm. The idea that 3 children with a highly responsible 9-year-old in charge would take a 5-minute, 2-mile bus ride to the local beach by themselves was completely acceptable. It was expected.
I think for anyone listening today, you have to completely reset your internal alarm bells. Nobody on that bus, nobody on that beach would have batted an eye seeing those 3 kids alone.
Not a single person.
It was just that era of, just be home before the streetlights come on. So let's look at the timeline of that morning. It's Australia Day. It is an absolute scorcher. The temperature is hitting 38 degrees Celsius, which is roughly 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Brutal heat.
Yeah, so the kids desperately want to go to Glenelg Beach to cool off. Nancy packs them off, giving them some small change, 6 shillings and 6 pence.
And that amount is very specific.
It is. It was specifically calculated to cover their bus fare and a light lunch, like a meat pie or some sausage rolls.
And right here, at the very inception of the timeline, we encounter our first major anomaly.
The time glitch.
Yes. Modern investigators, like journalist Brian Littley, have pointed out a documented time glitch in the police files.
Which is wild.
It is. Initially, Nancy Beaumont told police the children left the house around 8:40 a.m. to catch the 8:45 a.m. bus.
Okay, so early morning.
Right. And that specific bus would put them at the beach just after 9 in the morning. But in later formal police reports, the departure time mysteriously shifts to 10 a.m.
Wait, I really need to stop right there. How does that happen? I mean, I don't understand how a mother misremembers the last time she saw her children by an hour and 20 minutes.
It's a massive discrepancy.
Is this a case of trauma warping her memory? Because that happens, right?
It does happen, but it's highly unlikely she misremembered the morning routine that drastically.
Yeah.
Instead, we really have to look at the mechanics of 1966 police record keeping.
Okay, paint that picture for me.
Imagine a chaotic station house on the evening of a massive national holiday. You have an overwhelmed desk sergeant taking statements. You have carbon paper, handwritten notes, and shift changes.
Oh, right. No computers?
None. Information was constantly being manually transcribed from one ledger to another. It is very possible that a clerical error occurred early on, and because that error was written in the official report, it just became the accepted fact for decades.
So it could literally just be bad handwriting transferring from a notepad to a typewriter, like an 8 looking like a 10 somehow.
Exactly. Or, alternatively, if the Tenny-Reet time is somehow correct, it leaves an hour and 20 minutes completely unaccounted for.
Which is terrifying.
Truly. Were they at the beach earlier? Were they somewhere else entirely? It introduces a massive hole right at the beginning of the day. But we do know definitively that they arrived at Glenelg.
Right, because the bus driver remembers them.
Yes. And multiple witnesses placed them at the Collie Reserve, which is a large grassed foreshore area right by the beach, playing under the sprinklers to beat the heat.
But they weren't just playing alone, and this is where the narrative takes a deeply, deeply chilling turn.
It does.
Several independent witnesses reported seeing the children interacting with an unidentified man, and he's described quite specifically, actually.
Very specifically.
Yeah, he was tall, in his mid-30s, with a thin face, an athletic build, a suntan complexion, and light brown or blonde hair. And he was wearing these distinctive blue swimming trunks with white stripes.
What is truly unsettling is how the witnesses describe this interaction.
Right.
If a strange man approaches 3 children on a beach, you would expect hesitation, especially from Jane.
Exactly, based on everything we know about her.
But the witnesses noted the children didn't look scared at all. They weren't trying to pull away. They appeared completely comfortable laughing and clowning around with this man.
That makes my stomach drop.
And it gets worse. One witness even saw the man holding a towel and helping Jane get dressed after they had been swimming.
Which makes no sense. It makes absolutely zero sense based on the baseline we just established. Jane was 9.
Right.
She was perfectly capable of dressing herself. She was known to be shy. And she was the one who turned down the ice cream man 2 months prior. For a cautious 9-year-old to allow a strange adult male into her personal space, to allow him to physically help her dress.
It requires a massive breakdown of her internal defenses.
It really does. How does a stranger achieve that in an hour?
He doesn't. And the psychological implication of that specific interaction strongly suggests a classic methodical grooming scenario.
Well,
This likely wasn't a random, opportunistic snatch and grab by a stranger who just walked out of the sand that morning. This man had almost certainly built a rapport with them over time.
over weeks, maybe.
Exactly, perhaps over several previous trips to the beach throughout the summer.
And that completely lines up with a seemingly innocent comment made at home before all this happened.
Yes, the boyfriend comment.
Right. Arnna had told her mother that Jane had a boyfriend down at the beach. And Nancy, completely understandably for the era, just thought she meant a little boy her own age. A playmate.
Any mother would think that.
She didn't think twice about it. But when you look at it in hindsight, it's terrifying. It means this man had integrated herself into their routine so thoroughly that they viewed him as a friend.
It proves the trap had been set long before January 26th. He had been slowly dismantling their fear of strangers. And the predator's manipulation becomes undeniable when we look at their movements around lunchtime.
Okay, what happens at lunch?
At approximately 12:30 p.m., the children were seen at Wenzel's Bakery on Mosley Street, which is just a short walk off the main beach.
Wait, the bakery sighting stops me in my tracks.
What's that?
Well, if I'm a kidnapper and I am trying to stay under the radar and steal 3 children from a crowded public place, why on earth am I sending my primary target into a local store where the owner knows her?
It seems counterintuitive.
It does. And why am I sending her in with a highly conspicuous high-denomination bill? That seems incredibly reckless. It's bursting with red flags.
It seems reckless until you analyze the mechanism of isolation he is deploying.
What do you mean?
Well, the shopkeeper knew the children well from previous visits. Jane orders pasties, fizzy drinks, and a meat pie. The shopkeeper specifically notes that they had never bought a meat pie before.
Which is odd, but not a crime.
Right. But the true anomaly is the payment. Jane pays with a £1 note.
A pound note.
Yes. To put that in perspective, a £1 note in 1966 was a very substantial amount of money. Depending on how you calculate historical inflation and purchasing power, it's the equivalent of roughly $140 today.
And Nancy had only given them coins. 6 shillings and 6 pence. The children did not leave the house with paper money.
Exactly.
So where does a 9-year-old get $140 to buy a lavish lunch?
From the man in the blue swimming trunks. And this is where the mechanism of his crime becomes clear. Earlier that day, witnesses saw this exact same man approaching people near the beach, asking if they had seen Jane's purse, claiming her money was missing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's like a modern-day phishing scam. It's like a hacker locking you out of your bank account, manufacturing a crisis, and then posing as the IT guy who offers to fix it for you.
That is a perfect analogy. It is a textbook isolation tactic. He potentially steals or hides the children's meager bus fare, creating a severe problem for a responsible 9-year-old who knows she needs to get her siblings home.
She can't pay for the bus now.
Exactly. Then he swoops in as the savior, offering them a massive sum of money to buy an extravagant lunch. He creates a debt, he establishes absolute trust, and crucially, he eliminates their ability to simply hop on a bus and go home using their own money.
He is now in complete control of their logistics.
Completely.
It's so deeply calculating. And tragically, it works.
It does.
The children fail to return on the 12 o'clock bus. They fail to return on the 2 o'clock bus. Jim Beaumont, who had actually returned early from his sales trip around 3 in the afternoon, realizes something is wrong.
He goes straight to the beach.
Right. He drives down to the crowded beach. He searches the sand. He searches the promenade. He asks around. Nothing. By 5:30 p.m., the panic has fully set in, and the parents are at the Glenelg police station, officially reporting their 3 children missing.
And there was one highly disputed sighting later that afternoon that complicated the initial search tremendously.
The postman, right?
Yes. A local postman who knew the children well and whose testimony was initially considered very reliable by investigators, claimed he saw them walking alone, holding hands, and laughing.
Where are they heading?
Heading away from the beach, toward their home. And he clocked this at 2:55 p.m.
But wait, if they were walking home at 2:55, why didn't they arrive? Did someone intercept them on the street?
That was the initial fear, that it was a completely separate abduction on their way back. But a few days later, the postman contacted the police again and said he might have been mistaken about the time, that he might have seen them in the morning, not the afternoon.
How does memory work like that under pressure? Is it possible he saw them on a completely different day entirely?
It is highly possible.
Hmm.
We have to consider the psychology of memory conformity.
What's that?
Well, when an entire city goes into a state of acute panic, people desperately want to help. They rack their brains for any detail. The brain abhors a vacuum, so it sometimes stitches together a memory of the children from Tuesday and applies it to Wednesday, genuinely believing it to be true.
So he wanted to be helpful so badly, his brain just gave him what he thought was a clue.
Exactly. And the police had to sift through hundreds of these well-meaning but ultimately flawed sightings.
Because the police response was massive, right?
Unprecedented.
Within 24 hours, the entire nation knew the Beaumonts were missing. They monitored airports, railways, and interstate roads. They drew a perimeter around the state. They even drained the Patalonga Boat Haven, which is this large local waterway, after a woman claimed she spoke to 3 similar-looking kids near there that evening.
And despite all of that immense manpower, despite tens of thousands of eyes searching, they found absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
Think about the physical logistics of what the children brought to the beach. They had towels. Jane carried a specific recognizable airline bag. They had their street clothes. They had Jane's purse.
Right.
There were 17 distinct physical items in total. And out of those 17 items, not a single one was ever recovered. Not one.
That is the part that bends my mind. I can understand a person going missing, unfortunately, but 17 brightly colored objects on a packed beach.
Vanish.
It's like a magician pulling off a flawless illusion on a stage surrounded by thousands of people. But this isn't magic. It's reality.
No, it's brutal reality.
How do you physically remove 3 children and all their belongings from a busy seaside town in the middle of the day without a single person noticing a struggle? You don't just shove 3 kids into the trunk of a car kicking and screaming without someone calling the police. It requires total compliance from the victims.
Total compliance, or it requires a location incredibly close by where vehicular transportation isn't even necessary.
Oh, like walking distance.
Yes. If the predator lived within walking distance, the transition from public space to private horror happens in minutes. But we will explore that geography shortly.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
The broader point is, when authorities hit a total evidentiary wall like this, when the physical evidence remains at absolute zero, the public mind cannot accept it.
Of course not. It's unnatural.
Right. And decades later, internet sleuths on platforms like Reddit, alongside dedicated investigative journalists, step in to find the patterns hidden in the noise of history.
Which makes sense. When a single event makes no logical sense, you start looking for context. You start looking at the history of Adelaide itself. And when you look at true crime forums today, the Beaumont case is rarely discussed in total isolation anymore.
No, people zoom out.
Exactly. And one major theory that constantly surfaces is the connection to the Adelaide Oval abductions of 1973.
Yes. This is where the concept of the isolated perfect crime begins to fracture and reveal something much darker.
What happened at the Oval?
Well, 7 years after the Beaumonts disappeared, another horrifying public event occurred at the Adelaide Oval, which is a major, densely packed sports stadium. 11-year-old Joanne Ratcliffe and 4-year-old Kierce Gordon were attending a football match with their families.
Okay.
They left their seats to go to the public restroom together, and they never returned.
And the similarities are just eerie. You have the exact same city, another incredibly crowded public event.
Yes, and witnesses reported seeing a man leading the 2 girls away through the crowd. A tall, thin man, described as being in his 30s or 40s. And just like the Beaumonts, it resulted in the complete vanishing of multiple children with absolutely zero bodies or clothing ever found. This raises a profound statistical and criminological question that forums and experts have debated endlessly.
Which is?
Is it statistically probable that a relatively small city like Adelaide produced 2 distinct, highly organized, flawless predators who both targeted multiple children in crowded public spaces, leaving no trace, within 7 years of each other?
Or are we looking at the exact same perpetrator?
Right, or perhaps even more disturbingly, are we looking at a localized culture that actively enabled this type of crime?
Because if you accept that one person committed both crimes, you can actually eliminate several major suspects who were imprisoned during one of the 2 events.
You can.
But it also opens up this incredibly dark underbelly of Glenelg and Adelaide in the 1960s and 1970s. Investigative journalists, podcasts, and books have started painting a picture of a city that had an active network of pedophiles operating with terrifying impunity.
The phrase used by a local resident in one of our sources, a man who actually grew up alongside the Beaumonts, is chilling. He called that era the age of ignorance.
That's a heavy phrase.
It is. He noted that predators were deeply embedded in the social fabric of the town. They were at the community barbecues, the local pubs, the sideshows, and the beach. They used the era's inherent trust as camouflage.
They hid in plain sight.
Exactly. And this historical context brings several specific suspects into the light, men whose names have been fiercely debated online and in modern investigations.
Let's walk through some of these names and actually analyze how they operated, because the internet has practically built a corkboard with red string connecting all of them. First up is Bill Cotton.
Right. Bill Cotton is a deeply controversial figure in this narrative. He was a convicted sex offender who, in 1953, was jailed for a crime involving a teenage boy at a Glenelg public toilet block.
So he has the geographic proximity and the predatory history.
He does, but his theoretical connection to the Beaumonts is much more intimate. Modern investigators, specifically journalist Brian Littley, alleged that Cotton was actually having an affair with Nancy Beaumont.
Okay, I want to be very clear here because we have to be precise with the facts. The South Australian police have officially acknowledged that they knew about Cotton, they interviewed him at the time, and they stated there was absolutely no evidence of his involvement in the disappearance.
That is the official stance, yes.
But the theory suggests he was actually inside the Beaumont home on the day the children vanished, taking advantage of the fact that Jim was away on a business trip.
And this circles back to the mechanics of that time glitch we discussed earlier.
Oh, the 8:40 versus 10 hour thing?
Yes. If the children actually left the house at 10 an hour instead of 8:40 a.m., who were they with during that missing hour and 20 minutes? The theory posits that Cotton knew the children, knew the layout of the area, and possessed the predatory background.
But does it fit the beach sighting?
That's the question. Could he have been the man in the blue swimming trunks at the beach? Or was he simply a terrible person who happened to be nearby, or perhaps part of a wider network that shared information?
That network concept brings us to Les Davis, who was also known as Les Chappell. He was a worker at the sideshows, the little carnival area situated right near Glenelg Beach.
The sideshows were notoriously described by local residents as a literal hunting ground for predators. It was transient, chaotic, and filled with distracted children.
Or a perfect storm.
Davis had a string of offenses, and crucially, in the late 1980s, he was jailed for abducting 2 girls in the South Australian outback. We have to look at his modus operandi.
How did he operate?
He lured children to his car with candy in a game of hide-and-seek, locked them in the boot, and drove away. He utilized psychological manipulation to gain physical control without causing a public scene.
And the connection to the Beaumont case comes from his own family, right?
It does.
His sister claimed he was working at the Glenelg Carnival on Australia Day, 1966. Plus, there's an incredibly dark detail from a true crime source where one of Davis's later victims claimed he showed her printed photographs of the Beaumont children that he kept hidden in an underground tank on his property.
Which is a terrifying psychological detail. Keeping trophies or photographs is a well-documented behavior among serial offenders.
But can it be proven?
No. It is exceedingly difficult to independently verify that claim decades later. But it illustrates how interconnected these figures were. Davis was reportedly close friends with a man named Stan Hart, who was a major suspect in the 1973 Adelaide Oval abductions.
It's just a web of awful people.
It is. And the circle widens yet again to another Glenelg local, Tony Monroe.
Monroe was a former scout leader. He was later jailed for historic child sex crimes dating back to the early 60s. So he had access to children, and he was trusted by the community.
He had the social camouflage.
Exactly. The evidence pointing toward him in the Beaumont case is circumstantial, but it is highly specific. There's a child's diary from 1966 that supposedly places him near the beach that day. But the big bombshell is the testimony of a military veteran named David Smith, who came forward in 2015.
Smith's account is remarkably detailed, which is rare for a memory retrieved decades later.
What did he remember?
He claimed he was eating lunch near the beach when he interacted with 3 children and a man he later identified as Monroe. Smith noted the eldest girl was quite chatty. When he asked if she was hungry, she said no, explaining that the man had given them a pound note and they had already bought lunch at the bakery.
There's the pound note again. That detail matches perfectly with the bakery sighting.
It does. And Smith claimed he watched this group later get into a small, soft-top sports car, either a Porsche or an MGB, and drive away.
Which would solve a big logistical problem.
Yes. This account directly addresses the logistical question we raised earlier. How were the children removed from the area without causing a scene? A sports car offered an enticing ride to young children, removing them from the pedestrian area swiftly.
And then, of course, you have the heavy hitters of South Australian true crime lore, Arthur Stanley Brown and Bevan Spencer von Einem.
Two very dark figures.
Both were horrific serial offenders. Brown looked strikingly like the police identikit sketches from both the Beaumont and Adelaide Oval cases.
The resemblance is eerie.
And von Einem was linked to Adelaide's infamous family murders, a series of horrific crimes involving a literal network of abusers. There are even claims from an informant that von Einem boasted about taking 3 children from a beach for surgical experiments.
But we have to be incredibly careful here. The timelines and victim profiles for Brown and von Einem are very messy when applied to 1966.
How so?
Well, Brown was in his 50s in 1966, not his 30s as the beach witnesses describe. Von Einem was in his early 20s and typically targeted teenagers and young men, not prepubescent children.
So these really fit.
No, it highlights the inherent danger of retrospectively applying later high-profile monsters to an earlier unsolved crime just because the geography matches.
Okay, here's where I need to push back on this entire line of thinking.
All right.
We are talking about Bill Cotton, Les Davis, Stan Hart, Tony Monroe, Arthur Stanley Brown, and Bevan Spencer von Einem. We are constructing this massive tangled web of known predators, all seemingly hanging out at the same beach, all connected by 6 degrees of separation.
It's a lot to process.
I have to ask,
Yeah.
is it possible that human nature, and specifically the nature of internet forums, is just inventing a complex, interconnected pedophile ring to explain this mystery? Are we building a conspiracy simply because the idea of a single random monster walking onto a crowded beach, pulling off the perfect crime, and disappearing forever is just too terrifying for society to accept?
That is a highly astute psychological observation. Humans crave order, even if it is an evil order.
Right.
A network, a conspiracy, a ring, it provides a framework. It suggests that if we can just map the connections, if we can draw the red string correctly, we can solve the puzzle and understand the threat.
It gives an illusion of control.
Exactly. The alternative, that chaos and singular opportunistic evil can strike flawlessly in broad daylight, surrounded by thousands of people, violates our fundamental belief in a safe, predictable world. It means nobody is ever truly safe anywhere.
And that violation of safety, that shattering of the illusion of security, is exactly what reshaped Australian society. This wasn't just a crime, it was an era-defining cultural trauma.
It was a massive paradigm shift.
The Beaumont case, along with the Wanda Beach murders, where 2 teenagers were killed in Sydney the year before, acted as the definitive turning point in the national psyche. The era of unsupervised, carefree childhood abruptly ended.
Social commentators and historians frequently cite 1966 as the literal end of Australian innocence. Think about the mechanics of society before January 26th. Parents assumed the community was a safety net.
Right, the village raising the child.
Yes. If your kids were out playing, you assumed other adults were looking out for them. The baker, the bus driver, the postman, they were all part of a shared protective ecosystem.
And after January 26th?
After January 26th, that community became a landscape of potential threats. That shift replaced communal trust with permanent, exhausting parental vigilance. It altered how schools operated, how public parks were designed, and how subsequent generations of Australians raised their children.
We have this massive cultural trauma, and we have these sprawling internet theories trying to make sense of it. But I want to examine the harsh reality of the historical investigations.
Let's do it.
Why couldn't the police solve this? What were the actual mechanics of their failure? And what damage was done along the way by the desperation to find an answer?
To understand the failure, we have to look closely at the severe investigative limitations of 1966. Today, we take modern forensic tools completely for granted.
We really do.
In 1966, there was no CCTV covering the beachfront to track the man in the blue trunks. There were no DNA databases to cross-reference trace evidence. There was no cell phone tracking to pinpoint locations or communication networks.
It was literally shoe leather and paper files. Imagine trying to coordinate a citywide search today using nothing but rotary phones, index cards, and a corkboard.
Precisely. Let's look at geographic profiling as a concrete example of how things have changed.
Okay, how does that work?
Today, law enforcement uses advanced geographic information systems like ArcGIS. If a child goes missing today, investigators instantly map out transport hubs, traffic patterns, and common routes out of the area using algorithms.
All digitally.
Right. They can overlay CCTV locations, automatic license plate readers, and cell tower pings in real time on a centralized digital dashboard accessible to every officer in the field. They can instantly draw a digital net over a city.
Right, the technology allows them to lock down the geography mathematically. It's almost instantaneous.
But in 1966, the police were completely overwhelmed by an avalanche of manual data. Every time a tip came in, a sighting of 3 kids at a train station, a report of a blonde man at a motel in the next town, it was written on a piece of paper.
Just massive stacks of paper.
Yes. Cross-referencing those thousands of physical pieces of paper to find a pattern was a monumental, easily overwhelmed task. They monitored airports and railways, but they were doing it blindly compared to today's standards. They couldn't instantly verify if the blonde man at the motel was the same blonde man seen at the beach.
And that desperation, that feeling of drowning in paper while the public is screaming for answers leads to some really dark places. It leads law enforcement to entertain things they would normally ignore.
Desperate times, desperate measures.
It leads to hoaxes. And the damage these hoaxes do to an active investigation, the way they drain resources and destroy hope, is just staggering.
The Gerard Creuset fiasco is a prime example of how public desperation can completely derail professional police work. Creuset was a Dutch parapsychologist, essentially a psychic, who was brought to Australia in November 1966.
I have to ask, why is a legitimate police force handing the reins of a massive investigation over to a Dutch psychic? That sounds absurd today.
It does sound absurd, but to understand that, you have to understand the sheer crushing weight of public expectation in a pre-DNA era. When traditional policing hits a brick wall and the community is terrified, authorities sometimes grasp at straws to show they are leaving no stone unturned.
They just need to show they are doing something.
Furthermore, the media turned Creuset's visit into a circus, whipping the public into a frenzy of belief.
He claimed he had a vision, right? He said he saw where they were.
Yes. He identified a very specific spot near the children's home, an old brick kiln that had recently been built over by a warehouse, where he insisted their bodies were buried under a slab of concrete. The property owners, understandably, did not want to destroy their functional building based on a psychic's hunch. But the public pressure was so intense, the belief so fervent, that citizens actually raised $40,000, which was an absolute fortune, to buy the property outright just so they could demolish the building and dig up the floor.
Think about the logistics of that. They bought a building, tore it down, brought in heavy machinery, and ripped up a concrete foundation because a man from the Netherlands had a dream.
Yes.
And what did they find?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was a massive waste of resources, time, and emotional energy. It tied up investigators who could have been pursuing real leads, but it perfectly illustrates how desperate the community was for closure. They preferred the horror of finding bodies under concrete to the agony of not knowing.
And if the psychic was a waste of time, the 1968 Dandenong letters were just exceptionally cruel.
Beyond cruel.
The parents, Jim and Nancy, received letters in the mail that were supposedly written by Jane, and there was another letter from a man claiming he was keeping the children. He called himself their guardian and offered to meet the parents to hand them back.
The psychological torture that must have inflicted on Jim and Nancy Beaumont is unimaginable. To read a letter supposedly from your missing daughter 2 years after she vanished.
It's sickening.
And the police actually believed the letters might be authentic because the handwriting was somewhat similar to Jane's known handwriting. The parents drove to the designated meeting spot, accompanied by a disguised detective, and waited.
Just sitting there in the car.
They just waited, hoping to see their children walk out of the shadows. Nobody showed up. A final letter arrived shortly after, saying the guardian had spotted the disguised detective and had decided to keep the children forever as punishment.
It wasn't until 1992, over 2 decades later, when fingerprint technology and automated databases had finally advanced, that they proved the entire thing was a hoax.
26 years later.
The author was identified as a man who had been a teenager in 1968 just playing a sick joke. And because of the statute of limitations, he was never even charged with a crime. Just a staggering level of cruelty to inflict on a grieving family.
Which brings us back to the legitimate suspects, and perhaps the most compelling modern theory, which emerged long after the paper files of the 60s had gathered dust and the hoaxes had faded.
Who are we talking about?
We need to discuss Harry Phipps, often referred to in true crime circles as the Satin Man.
Okay, Harry Phipps. If there is a suspect that makes the hairs on your arms stand up, it is him. He wasn't a drifter. He was a wealthy local factory owner, part of Adelaide's social elite.
He hid behind money and status.
He completely fit the identikit profile. Tall, thin face, light hair. But it's his geography that is truly damning. He lived on the corner of Augusta and Sussex Streets. That is literally 300 meters from Collie Reserve, where the kids were playing in the sprinklers.
That proximity is critical. Earlier, we discussed the logistical difficulty of getting 3 children into a car without causing a scene.
Right.
If the predator lived just 300 meters away, he wouldn't need a car at all. He could simply say, "My house is just over there. Let's go get your money." Or, "Let's go look at my dog." It is a short, unremarkable walk down a suburban street. 3 children walking with an adult male 3 blocks from the beach wouldn't raise a single alarm.
And the specific details piling up against him are wild. He was known to have a habit of handing out 1-pound notes to children.
The exact denomination.
The exact denomination Jane used at the bakery to buy the meat pie. But the most explosive evidence against him comes from his own family. His estranged son, Hayden, who was 15 years old at the time of the disappearance, came forward decades later and claimed he actually saw the Beaumont children in their backyard on January 26.
He saw them walk in.
He said they walked in, went into the house, and he never saw them leave.
Furthermore, 2 separate men, who were youths at the time, reported to modern investigators that they had been hired by Phipps to dig a hole at his Castalloy factory in North Plimpton that very weekend.
To dig a hole?
Yes. They remembered being paid in 1-pound notes, and the hole they were instructed to dig was exactly grave-sized.
Wow.
2 meters long, by 1 meter wide, by 2 meters deep.
And then there's the purse. This detail is so chilling. In 2007, an investigator named Stuart Mullins was visiting the home of Phipps' widow, Elizabeth. He spotted a beige clip purse sitting there, a purse that perfectly matched the detailed description of the one Jane Beaumont carried that day.
Just sitting in the house.
We know killers often keep souvenirs to relive the crime. When police finally followed up on this tip later, the widow claimed she had thrown it away.
The sheer volume of circumstantial evidence surrounding Harry Phipps, the geography, the money, the son's testimony, the factory hole, the purse led to major modern excavations at the factory site.
They went in with modern tech, right?
They did. They brought in ground-penetrating radar. They dug in 2013 and found a radar anomaly, but no remains. They returned in 2018 with a massive media presence, digging for 9 hours straight. They found animal bones and industrial rubbish, but no children.
So frustrating.
And most recently, in February 2025, a privately funded week-long excavation at the site, again, yielded nothing.
So what does that mean? Is it an alibi hole? Like, did he have these youths dig a hole in an obvious spot just in case the police came snooping to distract them while he buried the children somewhere else entirely? Or is Harry Phipps just another dead end, another ghost in this 60-year-old maze?
That is the incredibly frustrating reality of cold case forensics. We are searching for needle-in-a-haystack evidence that has had 6 decades to degrade in the earth. But the science hasn't stopped. Investigators refuse to give up.
There have been recent developments, right?
Yes. Just recently, in March 2025, there was a new discovery, not at the Phipps factory, but related to that wider web of suspects we discussed earlier.
Right, the Yatina glass bone. Brian Littley and his team were excavating a disused site in Yatina, which is a rural property formerly owned by Stan Hart, the friend of Les Davis, and the suspect in the Adelaide Oval abductions.
What did they find there?
They found a fragment of a pelvic bone embedded with green glass in a rubbish pit. A highly respected anatomist, Professor Massey of Henneberg, assessed the bone and concluded it was most likely from a juvenile human.
It is currently with the South Australian Police, undergoing complex DNA extraction. The process is complicated by how the bone was collected and the environmental degradation.
Of course, after all this time.
While early indicators point to it possibly belonging to one of the Adelaide Oval victims due to the specific location, Littley insists that the overlapping nature of these suspect pools keeps the Beaumonts in play.
It is like investigating this case is an archaeological dig. You are searching for one specific artifact, the truth of what happened to Jane, Arnna, and Grant. But every layer of dirt you peel back uncovers a new, completely unrelated monster.
That dark history.
You find Bill Cotton's crimes, you find Liz Davis's horrors, you find Stan Hart's atrocities. It proves that the monsters were absolutely there, deeply embedded in the sand and the sideshows. But the dig never seems to yield the one artifact you are desperately looking for. It confirms the evil, but it doesn't solve the core mystery.
That is a deeply profound analogy. The search for the Beaumont children acted as a massive spotlight, illuminating a dark ecology of predation that the city had previously ignored or simply failed to connect.
Yeah.
The search forced society to look at the shadows. But tragically, the spotlight has never managed to illuminate the children themselves.
Which brings us to the tragic legacy of this case and the people who bore the heaviest burden, Jim and Nancy Beaumont. They endured the initial horror, the cruel hoaxes, the relentless media cycle, and the endless parade of suspects.
They went through hell.
They cooperated with every single lead, no matter how bizarre, whether it was psychics or rumors of religious cults. They lived their lives waiting for the front door to open.
Nancy famously said it would be dreadful if the children somehow returned and didn't find their parents waiting for them.
That breaks my heart.
Because of that, they stayed in their Somerton Park home for years, keeping the rooms exactly as they were. Eventually, the immense strain fractured their marriage and they divorced, choosing to live their final years quietly out of the blinding public eye that had scrutinized their every move.
But they never gave up hope. Nancy passed away in an Adelaide nursing home in 2019 at the age of 92. Jim passed away in 2023 at the age of 97. They lived nearly 60 years carrying that agonizing void, and they both died without ever knowing the fate of their children.
It is a heartbreaking conclusion to their personal story, and yet the case itself remains officially open, with the South Australian government still offering a $1 million reward for information leading to a resolution. The police files remain active.
As we wrap up our time today, I want to leave you, the listener, with a chilling realization to ponder. We started by talking about the terror of a single, flawless predator pulling off the perfect crime on a crowded beach.
Right.
But maybe that's not the true horror here. The true horror of the Beaumont investigation might be that the frantic, desperate search accidentally exposed just how many predators were comfortably operating in the shadows of one sunny, suburban beach town.
They were everywhere.
It wasn't that society was suddenly breached by one monster from the outside. It was that society was already living among them, completely unaware.
The stone dropped into the lake didn't just vanish. It disturbed the sediment, revealing exactly what was lurking at the bottom the whole time.
Next time, we travel to Philadelphia, where a series of brutal attacks terrorized one neighborhood and left investigators searching for a killer who seemed to vanish as quickly as fear spread through the city.